So good evening, one and all. I, Dr. Swati Chauhan, Associate Professor in the Department of English, Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies, would like to welcome you all for this 7 days International Faculty Development Program. Organized by Department of English, Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies, in association with Cape Comedian Trust India and Lavender Literary Club India. For giving a formal introduction, I feel privileged and honored that we have Dr. Chris as a speaker for this session. Here, I'm feeling privileged to give the formal introduction to Dr. Chris. Dr. Chris serves as a co-founder and CEO of Global Opportunities, Commercialization, and Director of APAC Health. He has extensive expertise in global commercialization of innovative education, healthcare, and technology products and services. He has also taught at university entrepreneurship and MBA programs in the field of innovation, corporate strategy, and venture development. He is a frequent international speaker, speaking at forums in Europe, USA, India, Africa, Asia, and Australia on themes including education models for emerging nations, youth and women empowerment, and its role in nation capability development. He serves on private and public governing boards and charities in several countries. He holds a PhD in molecular microbiology from RMIT University and a law degree from Monash University and executive training in leadership and strategy in pharmaceuticals and biotech executive training from the Harvard Business School. I feel so great that we have Dr. Chris among us. He's a great person and he's a man of eminent personality. He's a versatile person, and I'm sure that today, after his session, we will take so many takeaways and we will have some, beneficial things with us. So over to you, Dr. Chris, and we are so curious and eager to hear you. Thank you so much for coming. I would like to welcome you here. Namaskar. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Namaskar, and thank you, Associate Professor Chauhan. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with you as part of your program. Let me share my screen. So good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for that slight delay. What you can see on this image is two children who are absolutely excited about the prospect of learning. It's an emotional connection that we instantly have when we see young kids in a mindset of creativity, learning, role playing, and we ask the question, what happens later in life when their creativity is stifled or reduced? And in fact, with our organization, Global Opportunities Commercialization, myself and the other two co-founders, we sat down very early on, and just for your information, the other two co-founders are former academics, one a vice chancellor of Lake Jagiran University, the private university in India, another one professor of universities in Australia and Middle East. And we sat down and we said, we have the ability with our business to undertake certain projects around the world. But what legacy are we to leave for the following generation? Is it of interest to us to leave a legacy? What is it that's important for us as we move into our mature years, senior years? And we thought commercialization is exciting for us, innovation is exciting, entrepreneurship is exciting, but we need to be able to transmit that in a model to the next generation. So if we move on to the second slide, please. Thank you. setting the scene, our underlying values and virtues. How we spark the mindset of the young is up to us. But intuitively, it reflects our values and virtues, how we see the world, what we consider good or bad, what we consider as growth elements. And in this image here, Western philosophy is reflected by the painting of Raphael, painting entitled The School of Athens, where he has a number of philosophers, male, female, mathematicians, scientists, talking about how to explain our society, our universe, our world, and what sort of virtues and values we should enshrine and practice. So that's really important for us in setting the scene. What is it that we seek to do? We all have an idea. That idea is fostered to a large extent from our family, our faith, our communities, and to an emerging extent, social engineering forces through social media and internet and globalization. So if we may move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. May we move to the next slide, please? Wonderful. Thank you. Here we have some wonderful images of what it is that we're seeing. So youth, we define not as little children at kindergarten level, but primary school, secondary school, and university as well. That wonderful image on the left of a father and son. The youth see what adults miss. And we use the metaphor of the binoculars, where the son's saying, "Dad, it's not like that, it's like this." The university student in the middle, Alec Margolin, has a flair for introducing seminars at his university. And he's a science student and also a business student. The female high school student on the right, Yanina, loves the environment. Let's protect the environment. What terrible things are the older generation doing to the environment? We have to take steps. We are responsible. So you see some wonderful imagery, but emotions as well of these people. They all have passion. Often, when I was a child in a room with relatives, the children wouldn't say a word. That was the cultural norm. But these days, children are more expressive. Now, we had passion too. All children, we believe, have passion. But they seek our direction, just as a child does from its parents or its school teacher. And us as parents and us as teachers, we aspire a better world for them. So these combination of factors represent some of the underlying foundations which sit above the values and virtues. Next slide, please. So we created a program called the Young Dream Creators. I'll explain what the program was about and its relevance from a teaching perspective during the course of the presentation. But we thought, rather than having a traditional classroom of course curricula, we would allow the child or the young to create a program based on their passion. Just on their passion. If they like sport, if they like art, if they like reading, if they like community engagement, if they like the environment, if they like sport, if they like the internet. We have to find out what the passion is. And in the West particularly, this is a major, major problem. Kids are caught up with social media, IT, and you see them walking around with their phones, hardly speaking. In fact, a lot of them have lost the ability to discuss and to talk freely. And they walk around blind, in a sense. So we seek to spark the passion in this program. We also enforce that the impossible is possible. Because often kids are taught, oh, well, you can't do that. What are you doing? Go back to your room. That's a ridiculous idea. That's not possible. And it hurts and belittles the child. We have the opposite strategy. The impossible is possible with us. We seek to stimulate entrepreneurial creativity and innovation. Now, that's a big drive for the GOC, or Global Opportunities Commercialization business mantra. We love entrepreneurship. We love creativity. We love innovation. We also seek to co-create with the young person a passion-based project. So we don't leave them on their own and say, wonderful idea, off you go. We are part of that journey. And in fact, that teaches the child a little bit about collaboration and reflection of interacting with adults. Now, because we have an international business, we have a core requirement that the outcomes must have an international benefit. Now, that's also surprising for the children, because they say, what do you mean our project has an international element? I don't understand. How is that possible? Why is my project of such interest to the international community? That makes the impossible possible, but it also allows us to spark the mindset of the child or the student to say, you know what, you're worth a lot more than merely a project within your class. You have the ability to change the world. Now, as we conduct this project, we are fine-tuning communication and written skills, because one of the elements here is the teaching and pedagogy element. If the student wants to ask for something, we expect and train them to be clear. We expect them to, and work with them, to communicate with as many a complex lexicon as possible based on their age bracket. We also expect and not only expect, but demand that their communication's in writing as well. That seems quite harsh, but you'll see as we progress in this presentation that it's not harsh at all. In fact, it's a trick. It's a magic trick that the young don't see coming. Next slide, please. Oh, if we go to the previous slide, previous one. Stop there, thank you. So what else are we doing? We stimulate global networking and respect for our world. The young are often not exposed to people from other parts of the world. I wasn't exposed. Our family wasn't exposed. But we think with the era of globalization and with the era of media such as Google Meets, Zoom, WhatsApp, Skype, and many other platforms, students are being exposed to the international community, but often they don't feel part of it. And we say, no, you must feel part of it. It's almost an ethical obligation, and you must respect our world to learn of different cultures, their values, different challenges that people face in different parts of the world, challenges that we face here as compared to others in other parts of the world. The next item is a fascinating one, benefiting from multicultural and multi-age connections. Now, in a school setting, we see different age connections where you have the student and the teacher is older and also more learned and from a different culture perhaps. But in our organisation, we like to mix it up. For example, young participants will be exposed to people from different faiths, obviously the two different genders, but also different age groups and people who've had experience in different parts of the world. Now, how do we find these people? Well, they are part of our organisation because we have selected specifically for different qualities in our people. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Navigating and managing twists and turns for resilience and overall well-being. We've noticed that, particularly in the West, the resilience of the students, whether primary, secondary, or tertiary, is very low compared to when I was a youngster, when my parents were youngsters. It's not the purpose of today's program to discuss the reasons for that, but merely to acknowledge our observation. Children are a lot more anxious now than they were before. In some societies, they're being medicated at primary school level because of anxiety, depression, and other conditions. Many schools have psychologists on staff to manage students. Again, a concept foreign to me prior to my son entering school and hearing about that within the school context from our friends who've also had children at school. Now, navigating and managing twists and turns, what does that mean? When the children or the students impart on a project, there will be good days and bad days. There will be challenges. Things will not go right sometimes. It's never smooth sailing. And we tell them that's just how life is. And let's figure out how we should manage this. So we play a quasi-psychology role. We use academic skills in a practical way. We mentioned in the previous slide how to read, how to write, how to speak. There are other skills as well that we impart, which we will reflect and show as we move ahead. We develop a love for learning. One of the amazing attributes of our staff is that they're passionate about and very optimistic about the future, about what we see in the young. And the last point, which was drilled into me from one of our staff, say, Chris, whatever you do, this program must be fun. And we were talking about entrepreneurship and innovation, and they said, no, no, no. If it's not fun, it's not going to work. And I said, all right, let's go with your idea. And it was one of the guiding principles that has made this program internationally acclaimed and highly successful. Next slide, please. So now we're going to run through the program as it has been utilised by three categories: primary school, youth, secondary school, and university. So let's look at the primary school. In this first slide, there were two boys, 11 years old, who, like two typical boys in Australia, like sport, like the internet, YouTube, like sport, as we said, and they enjoy school as well. And they got together and they said, well, we are interested with what you're doing. Have no idea what we're really going to conduct as by way of project. We're not even sure what our passion is, but you know what? There's a few things we like. We want to speak to kids from different parts of the world. Our age, though, we don't want to speak to old people. And they thought 20 was old as well. We don't want to speak to the young because they're a bit silly still. We want to learn about how they live, their local community, their local school, what they like about school, what they hate about school, what problems they have in their community. And we want to get them all together, and this is their big dream. Get them all together in one city in Australia and try and figure out solutions to their problems. A little bit like a United Nations Parliament. And they called it the Communal Nations by Kids. Not our title. And we said, what a fascinating idea. And we said, well, can we arrange for you to speak to children from different parts of the world? And they said, oh my God, that'd be magical. How do you do that? And we said, well, we have friends in different parts of the world, and let's ask whether they know of friends who've got kids your age who are willing to have a chat. And they said, oh, can you do that? And we said, well, let's give it a go, because we didn't know whether we could do it either. That's the purpose, and that's the unusual aspect of a passion-based project. We never know what it's going to be, but we know when we get there because we all have that feeling of anticipation, possibility, and success. So in the image in this slide on the left-hand side, on the laptop, you see the two boys, and in the little insert there, which you can't see, is a classroom of kids their age in Belgium. And the snapshot captures them laughing. Now, I'll tell you why they're laughing. Because the kids in Belgium have English as their second language. They don't speak English like we do. So when the call started, there was a translator on the other side. And the boy said, why is there a translator? And we said, well, in some parts of the world, they don't speak English. And they said, oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, what do they speak? Well, depending on which part of Belgium, it's either French or Flemish, etc. And the kids said, oh, well, what do we do now? We said, well, let's just say hello, introduce yourself, ask your questions, see what happens. And they had a great time. They made long-lasting friendships from kids they'd never met. And similarly, the kids from Belgium had never met two Australian kids. So they wanted to know about Australia and what do you do and what don't you do. On the right-hand side, the boys, after a while, figured out how to develop questions. Because when they're interviewing kids from different parts of the world, you haven't got all day. You can't ask them 40 questions. Sometimes the questions are not understood. So on this right-hand image, we have a shot from a WhatsApp interview where the boys are interviewing a lovely lady, lovely young girl who I think would be an ambassador one day, extremely intelligent, from an African country. And the boys had no idea. They'd never heard of the country. And we said, okay, your homework before you start, find out something about the country. Where is it? What's the population? What's the capital city? What's the city that the person you're going to interview with lives? And they're running off to their iPads and to their computers, and that's fine. And they came back and said, oh, guess what? It's this, it's that, it does this. Fantastic. What a fantastic passion project for these kids. So the note at the bottom says currently interviewed over 30 children from 8 countries, and the journey continues because the kids don't want to give it up. In fact, they've been invited to speak to a national conference because the organisers were amazed at how excited the students were, but how it increased their English skills as well. Next slide, please. Here they are being interviewed by Dr. Ria Ertz, the program leader. Oh, and that logo, by the way, is their logo. So again, identifying local challenges, raising global awareness, seeking financial support, conducting an international gathering to discuss global concerns, and devise solutions. And there they are with Ria, and they're having a wonderfully open and frank discussion. So Ria's in Australia from Belgium, a director of innovation entrepreneurship, lived in many, many different countries around the world, so understands international globalization. Next slide, please. So what are the learnings? Okay, empowerment, collaboration, writing, because we said to the kids, write down your questions. I want an Excel sheet. I want you to categorize the answers based to the questions for each of the students you've spoken to. I want you to then analyze that from a data perspective. They had lots of fun. There was patience as well, because sometimes calls had to be done at different times of the day, depending on the time zones of the other children. And of course, being children, you've got parents, you've got school, you've got, if it's evening, well, the kids have to come home, have dinner, a bit of homework if they do, bathing, reading, bedtime. So you've got to figure that out as well. How to speak properly, how to ask specific questions, data analytics, cultural diversity, understanding and respecting different cultures and different environments. In one call, there was a rooster in the background, and these kids from Melbourne said, "What is that?" Well, this particular family had a farm or farm animals as part of their home environment. And our kids were amazed. They said, "You're kidding me." So they learned about that. They learned about leadership as well. Confidence. Respect from adults. So they noticed that the adults were treating them with respect. They weren't treating them like children. They were respecting them. So then what happens is that they open up more. They would discuss, well, I've got this idea. I've got that. What if we do a YouTube video? What if we do this? What if we do that? And as adults, our job was not to kill the idea, but to nurture it and put it in position. So they had the ability, they saw the ability to have big dreams and to see results. So what was our role? And the reason why we've got YGE is that within our GOC business, the business unit that covers the Young Dream Creators program falls within the Youth Global Empowerment area, because we also have other programs. Our role is to draw out the passion, to give them project development guidance, to say, right, in the next 5 weeks, what are you going to do? Which countries would you like to cover? We have to find kids, so therefore we're almost an external consultant helping you. You've got to take into consideration our timings. I want to see presentations. I want you to present in front of your parents and us. So there's a project development mentality. And the kids didn't see it. They just thought, well, it's just what you do. It wasn't called project management. Positive learning from failure. There were moments when the call just stopped because the internet connection went down. In one call to Africa, the call stopped. And 5 minutes later, I've got an SMS saying, sorry, our power generator's gone, or our electricity's gone. We've had to fire up the power generator. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Now, the kids had no idea what that meant because they've lived in a privileged society of electricity, food, love and caring from parents. So to see these environments was very instructive for them. Introduce external experts. So they got to speak to people from different parts of the world through our relationship. So that was our method of providing for the students. So we'd often speak to one contact overseas that we maybe have a commercial contact. They would then say, oh, hang on a second, let me speak to one of my friends or one of my relatives or one of my business associates. Then they would speak to someone else and we would access the child for the interview. Constant parental liaison to meet expectations. We're dealing with kids here. We're dealing with malleable mindsets. We're not going to do this without the parents. Not going to happen. The parents are the parents. We are not the parent. So we need to make sure that the parents are constantly aware of the journey. And in some instances, especially in the beginning, the parents would be sitting in at all the interviews. And that's perfectly expected. Not an issue at all. Because you never know what can be discussed. You never know who's on the other side of the phone. It's all life experimentation. So you can see from this slide what the children learned, but what our role was as well. Next slide, please. Now let's move on to secondary school youth. Next slide, please. Right. Secondary school means a little bit more mature, a little bit more comfortable with the language, written skills, logical thought in mindset, a little bit more ambitious in what you seek to undertake, perhaps. A little more confident and driven, perhaps. Biogas Circular Economy Project. When I heard this, I thought, what is this about? The mission to reduce waste and harmful gas emissions by creating renewable energy sources for the local and global community. Wow, that's the sort of mission I'd expect from a multinational corporation with a very active corporate social responsibility program. Yet here, we've got a couple of high school kids who are just sick and tired of their perception of how we as adults treat the environment, with the amount of rubbish we produce, with the plastics, carbon emissions, water usage. And they said, no, we're not happy with that. So I said, okay, well, what do you want to do? They said, well, we have compost bins at school. I said, yes. Well, compost gives off gas. I said, okay. One of the types of gas is methane. I said, okay, I know what that is. And they said, we want to extract the methane, take it up, buy a tube, take it, and put it back into the school for cooking and lab science classes. I thought to myself, you got to be kidding. How fantastical is this project? It's just amazing. Now, remember our role, it's to make the impossible possible. We weren't in a position to say, yeah, no problem, we've got all the smarts within our organization, we will help do it. Because we don't. We don't have those engineering skills. But that's not the point. The point is We have to live who we are as well. Global opportunities, commercialization. We have to find those people. We have to leverage our friendships, our relationships, both within the country, within the region, and internationally. And guess what? We broke it up into hundreds of little steps. And we said, right, geez, how do we help this student? And we figured it out. We opened doors, and all of a sudden, it's not that difficult when you are forced, if you will, to come up with solutions. Next slide, please. So there were a team of 4 secondary students, different backgrounds, and that's the wonderful thing about Australia, being a multicultural melting pot. There were kids from Europe, Singapore, Australia. But because they're a little bit older, we said, right, okay, we're now going to get into almost a business plan type culture. Produce a feasibility study. Oh, what's a feasibility study? How do you do that? Get online and find it. If not, we'll find some templates for you. Collecting used materials. Now, what sort of materials do you use in order to either construct a prototype extractor or assess methane that's being exuded or emitted through the compost? Hands-on building and testing of a prototype. Now, what a lot of fun that was for them. For us, we sat in amazement going, you've got to be kidding. Wow. Okay. They found prototype models on the internet. They spoke to companies online. Of course, there was COVID. Welcome to COVID land. Welcome to pandemic land. Everything was shut down. Well, what are you going to do? You're still going to figure it out. Prior to COVID, some of the kids traveled overseas with family. They met and spoke with other organizations around the world that were also extracting methane, not from compost and not from a school perspective, but from other perspectives. But we said to them, hang on, if they can do it in either an industrial grade or some other grade, surely the elements can be configured for what you want to do. So teach the other young people by developing an instruction booklet and a curriculum for schools. That's where we're going with this, because a lot of schools have said, hang on a second, hang on a minute. I like what you're doing, maybe, because it obviously overlaps with science classes. It overlaps with project management-y type subjects. Can we have a project which leverages this sort of activity within our curriculum? And that's what the school is currently looking at. So you can see this is not just a fanciful project that youth undertake to pass the time or maybe to build a bit of confidence, but it has a direct bearing on their passion, where they want to go, and their learning skills as well. Next slide, please. Learnings. Learn from past research in diverse areas: chemistry, biology, safety, engineering, mathematics. They had to touch on these areas in order to deliver their project. Collaborate with experienced international and local organizations. Now, how are you possibly going to do that as part of a high school project? This is where the children said, wow, are you serious? We're going to be dealing with international, but we're only in mid-high school. I don't understand. And we said, well, you will, and we'll help you do that. Project, so work with and learn from engineers and other experts. That was very important because it taught them the life lesson that, hang on a minute, there are others around us who are much better than we are. There are others who've gone to university and learned particular disciplines. Oh, now I know what an engineer does. Got it. Now I know why chemistry is important. Got it. Project planning and management. That was a lot more intensive than the primary school project for obvious reasons. But they loved it because it was their passion. It was almost like an assignment, an extended assignment. Communication and presentation. Often, children, for probably right reasons as well, are a little bit nervous. They're a bit intimidated. Oh, what do I put in a presentation? How do I get up and talk? Is it okay to read? And I was one of those, certainly, where if you said to me, even in high school, get up and front of the class and talk for 10 minutes, I couldn't do it. I would have been a nervous wreck. But the kids are following a passion project, and that changes the rules for their cognition and their anxiety and their resilience. Hands-on building experiences. This is really important for our youth generally, rather than saying, oh, listen, I'll show you how to do this. Or don't worry, you go and do something else. I'll do it. They're doing it themselves. They're learning themselves. And in this picture here, you can see that the four girls on the left, Dr. Rhea Ertz, Alec Margolin, who was in that earlier slide, the university graduate in biotech, and on the right, an engineer, an expert in this area. And they had a discussion. They had a meeting. They had a discussion. What should we do? What should we think about? How should we proceed? What should we not be doing? And it was a wonderful project. Next slide, please. Now, let's move on to another kettle of fish, as we say, the university youth. Next slide, please. All right. This is fascinating because this is a little bit closer to what we had also envisaged through the founders of GOC. But this was a surprise. So we had the chap on the right, Andrew Gavigan, an emerging global thought leader, let me tell you. And if there's a chance for you to meet him, please take it. Dr. Rhea Ertz on the left. Andrew came to us and said, I was his mentor through university, and he was finishing off a finance degree. Very intelligent, very knowledgeable, wonderful gentleman. And we started talking. And he said, well, I've got to start looking for work, and I'm not sure what to do. And I said, listen, we've got friends up and down the street, and the image here is now office in Collins Street, which is the center of the business district. And within the building and up and down the street, all the traditional banking and investment firms are there. So I said, Andrew, we could make a few phone calls, get you interviewed. I said, but tell me a bit about yourself. And he started talking, about culture, youth culture, and sneakers. And I said, oh, sneakers? Well, what's that all about? Well, Chris, there are sneakers that are worth $2,000, $4,000, $5,000. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Again, I'm a different generation and not as sporty as the current generation. And he illuminated me to the world and the culture surrounding sneakers. I said, wow, Andrew, thank you. I've really learned something. And, mentoring is not one way, it's actually two way. And I said, oh, so it sounds to me as though you really love it. Because I love it. Fantastic. Wouldn't it be cool to design some sneakers? I said, oh, what did you say? He said, wouldn't it be cool to design some sneakers? I said, well, what's stopping you? Have you got some ideas? Have you got some concepts? Have you got a brand? He said, you know what? I do. I've been thinking about it and, jotting stuff at home. I said, oh, do you know what we do at GOC is also we foster startups, incubators. He said, oh, I didn't know that. I said, well, you do. If you want to pursue this passion of yours, you might start up a company. We have friends who can finance it. We have friends who manufacture sneakers in India, but in other parts of the world. We have friends who distribute. I said, Andrew, it's just a phone call. And he said, you've got to be kidding. I said, no, it's not. That's just how this works. So he has now continued with GOC. And one of his projects is his startup. So because a lot of us have lived the startups and advised and helped startups raise money and develop, we said, okay, Andrew, you have to develop the why. Why are the sneakers of interest to anyone? What's your motivation? I want you to design the sneaker with your team, and then, and I'm talking about just, AutoCAD software type design. Then I want you to take it to international market validation. He said, oh, why do you want to do that? I said, well, don't you want to know whether people are going to be interested in it? Don't you want to know whether people like the story? Often, especially in the West, we get sucked in by a story, not the product. If somebody has a particular handbag, it's, oh my God, that actress has the handbag. I've got to get the handbag. But don't worry, it's not just the women. The guys are just as bad as well. Oh my God, that person's driving that Ferrari. Oh, I've got to get one of those. So you must have market validation. Then approach funding, distribution, and international market access experts. They will tell you whether your sneakers, how they need to be introduced into a particular country, who the distribution partners are going to be, and then commence commercialization as a startup. And that's what Andrew's doing now. And it's been a fascinating process for him because he is learning from us as we distribute products into different parts of the world, as we validate, maybe fund, position, and distribute. And he's seeing how that impacts on what he's doing. So that's a nice little twist to the Young Dream Creators program. Next slide, please. So learnings, the practice of innovation, entrepreneurship and commercialization, it's very different. Empowerment, self-belief, the value of collaboration. You can't do this on your own. You need people who are designers, prototypers, figure out fabrics, manufacturers, etc. But Andrew learned the ability to rapidly access subject matter experts from different countries. And that's one of the strengths of our organization. If you have a new teaching curriculum and you want to know whether it might be of interest to groups in Somalia, Nigeria, Belgium, Poland, Singapore, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, we can get that information within 2 weeks from the subject matter experts, whether it's the teachers or the distributors. That's what Andrew learned. He said, my goodness me, never heard of that before. I said, Andrew, that's just how the system works. Mentoring as well. It's a lifelong process. So the ability to set dreams and not be discouraged. Often it'll be, oh, it sounds too hard. One of my friends said it was a ridiculous idea, so maybe I should just dump it. I said, no, stick with your dreams. You've got people around you to validate it. Off you go, we will support you. So what was our role? And I think it's important as we've progressed during this presentation for you not only to hear the learnings, but our role as well. Drawing out the passion, the project development guidance, the international advice, branding, investors, manufacturers, mentoring, and also legal considerations. Next slide, please. Our people. You can see different age groups. They come from different religion, faith-based. They come from different expertise. We've got Diversity, I don't know where to start. We've got James Nixon, an A380 pilot, who can tell you more about management of aviation and selling into aviation than anyone else. Ahmed Toho, Director of East Africa, can tell you the culture of the Africans, the role of tribal leaders, and the social interaction. Sasha Kaluri, one of the top motivational speakers in Australia, speaks to hundreds of schools here, US, has been involved with teenage expos, knows how to draw out the child's strength and what they need to do to get their tribe. On the left, too, Dr. Yamin and Professor Dr. Swarab, my co-founders, international players in education and innovation entrepreneurship. We've got Andrew, Janelle, and Alec as well, who are our university group. Darlene, one of the top psychologists in the country, and Dr. Raina in health management overseas. So these people have experience over many, many years, different countries, different age groups, different ages, different faiths, different socioeconomic groups. It's a wonderful melting pot. If we had the same set of people, it'd be a boring organization. It wouldn't do it. It wouldn't deliver what it's doing. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly go through this. So the program consists of a pre-commencement questionnaire registration. We want to know whether the children are being put into this program because their parents want them, or whether they have a bit of freedom as well. And we want to know whether there's commitment from the parents as well, because it's quite a robust program. It needs parents to support it. So there's the step one, discovery, brainstorming, planning, execution, and presentation of outcomes. So even though there's a lot of unknowns as to direction, once we figure out what the project is, we can say, fantastic, that especially project managers will say, right, there's 5 steps before you get to the end. This is what we're doing. This is the fence that we're putting around the project. And off we go. Next slide, please. So our learnings. And it's always wonderful for an organization to reflect on what it's doing, rather than to be arrogant and say, well, it's the best program in the world. So what have we learned? That the communication skills of the youth improve substantially. Oral, written, mathematics, we push it as well. If somebody comes to me and says, oh, it's like, I said, no, I don't know. I don't understand the word like. What are you trying to say? Oh, good, thank you. That's the word. Project management, they have to come and understand logical steps, whether you're primary or older. Logic. I want to understand why you're thinking that way. What's the logical process? Because they're not taught logic at school. The health impact. Guess what? And this was a surprise to me. Anxiety is reduced. Depression or alleged depression, reduced. Resilience, through the roof. Empowerment, respect, through the roof. The fact that we're not dream stealing. Now, this is a great term that James Nixon, our pilot, said. When I was a kid, I had all these wonderful ideas and everyone said, you're an idiot, you're wrong, you've got no hope, you'll amount to nothing. They were stealing my dreams, Chris. I said, my God, I'm going to use that phrase, but I'll attribute it to you. We are not dream stealing. We mustn't do that to the kids, whether it's primary, secondary, or university. However, another big impact is the 360-degree impact, because when the student has that impact, it reflects, the teacher sees it, the family sees it, the friends see it, and the community see it. So we're actually not just empowering the child, but we're improving the ecosystem. Now imagine if that occurred on a bigger multiple. And the obvious is what we actually started to do. Our objective was innovation, creativity, expansion, possibility. Yes, but that became, of all things, the least important, because all these other activities above made a significant impact as to why the program is quite successful. Next slide, please. It's in their eyes. Just look at the eyes of this child. He's dreaming. He's off. He sees the world in a different way. The parents are thinking, right, okay, we're going to be down at the beach for half an hour. Then we'll have, dinner and blah, blah, blah. Their eyes say it all. They are off. Next slide, please. So what we want to do, and we being including yourselves, let's ignite the talent in our youth, because we can do it, you can do it, you're doing it, I'm sure, but by having an international relationship, even amongst our organisations, we can empower the youth to an untold level, which will then reflect back on our community, but enable them to solve the world's problems and make this place a better place, which is one of our objectives. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. It was a wonderful presentation. And yes, the last quote which you have mentioned on your slide, let's ignite the talent in our youth. This is really required, because being a faculty member, being a teacher, I can see now students are not so much ignited to know something. They are little reluctant to listen their teachers and to listen the lectures. So really we need to ignite them. And the things which you have discussed in the presentation, yeah, yes, the projects and the presentations, these are very much required nowadays. Even, due to this corona, COVID, since last 1.5 years, we people are doing teaching online. And this online teaching is hampering our students at some extent, because teachers are not able to keep an eye on them. Because in the physical classes, we can check them, we can keep an eye on them, regularly. So now the things are changed. So, I'm really happy to hear this session, and I feel all the participants have taken many things from the session, and they are going to use them in their teaching for sure. I feel we have some queries in the chat box. So let me take the queries quickly. Dr. Chris, I can see many compliments are there in the chat box. Uh, it was an informative session, and it was a pleasure to listen, Dr. Chris. Many participants are giving so many compliments. The chat box is full of the compliments. Many compliments are popping up in the chat box. So I'm really thankful to you for giving such a wonderful session and for joining us. Participants, if you have any query, you can ask to Dr. Chris. We will have a open session now.
And feel free to pass the presentation to any of your colleagues or the participants as well.
Yes, if anyone wants to ask anything or have any query.
Good evening. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, sir. We can
Good
hear
evening.
you.
Good evening. This is SK Bose. Just thank you so much, Dr. Chris, for a wonderful session. At the same time, I have a small query that I understand that creative mindset sees collaboration as a critical part of the process and success. So it's worth making a slight distinction between growth mindset and creative mindset. What is your take, Dr. Chris?
On the growth mindset versus the creative mindset? Is that your
Right.
question?
Yes, yes.
I think you're right, that they are different, and they are nurtured slightly differently as well. But the key is to identify the difference and then to design activities which repeat both the creative side as well as the growth mindset. Growth mindset often requires a little bit more foundation because you're looking to longitudinally grow, whereas the creative mindset, I think, can be sparked a lot. It's a different igniting point, which can happen through one very short event. And when it's been sparked, then that has a time period as well before it needs to be resparked. So it's a very good point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Chris. We have another query in the chat box. Santosh Singh is asking this thing. If a child is not exposed to creative mindset before secondary stage, can that creative mindset be developed at secondary stage, all which are not attained in early years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see in many cultures where children are told to be very quiet in their young age, or don't spend a lot of time with adults, or are admonished for anything, and therefore hold back and closing the shell. At high school, they have a little bit more freedom because they're a bit older. They've got to conduct activities, assignments a little bit on their own. So it is not difficult at all to look through the forest to find that passion that they've got. So for us, it's not an issue at all. We often ask 30 or 40 questions, a little bit like psychologists, and you triangulate because you're looking for anything, any little thing that they're positive about, and that's what we open up on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. It was really a wonderful session and lot many informations we have taken. So if any other participants has any query, because I cannot see any other query in the chat box. I can see only compliments in the chat box.
Thank you. Feel free to connect through LinkedIn or email and so forth. So it's not an issue. These days with communications, it's always wonderful to connect quickly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris.